This is Math Unmasked for Unit 4, Lesson 2, our alternate unit. So today we were again looking at fractions in between other fractions, specifically fractions that have different denominators. So the first question in your homework, which is this home link here, looks like this. There's also a Google form if you're working at home. And it says, Maggie says there are no fractions between 1/4 and 1/3. Provide an example for Maggie and explain why you can always find another example. So there's a couple of different ways that we can look at this, right? We can think about these fractions numerically and we can see like third, four, they're both one. How could there be anything in between? But if we think about these as pi, and you know how I feel about pi, right? We've got this fraction, which is a fourth, and we've got this fraction, which is a third, and we can see like it's possible to cut a piece of pie that's bigger than this slice, that's not quite as big as this, but we need some different names for it. So we still have our fraction strips from yesterday's lesson, and if you don't have these at home, they are linked under Thursday's lesson 4.1. They're 0 to 2 fraction strips. I've shortened them to 0 to 1 fraction strips. We can say 0 to 1, there's a whole. I've cut it in half. Here I've cut it in fourth, 1/4, 2/4 is the same as a half, 3/4. And you can see down here, this 1/3 is slightly bigger than this 1/4, right? It goes just a little bit further on that line. Okay, now I know that I can turn fourths into eighths, right? I just slice them all in half. But mathematically, when I'm renaming fractions, if I multiply the top and bottom here to turn it into an eighth, I can't turn this into eighth. If I take thirds and cut them into halves, I'd have sixths, but again, I can't turn fourths into sixths. So you'll notice down here, I have across here 12ths, right? You can see I've cut this into 12 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? And this 12, 1, 2, 3, 4 12s lines up with 1/3, which makes sense because if I multiply the top and bottom here, I get 4 12ths, right? And if I go all the way down here, 3 12ths lines up with 1/4, right? Because 1 times 3 is 3, 4 times 3 is 12. You might say, Ms. Zuber, again, I've got 3 12s, I got 4 12s, there's nothing in between. That's true, but I can always make my fractions smaller, right? If I take this line and I'm cutting this into smaller pieces, right? So right now I'm just duplicating my tick marks. So again, I have 12. If I cut each of these in half, instead of having 12, I have 24. And you can see right now, I'm going to use a different color so you can see it a little bit better. I do have a tick mark in between the 4 12ths and the 3 12ths. Okay, now that 3 12ths would be marked with a 6 24ths, and this would be marked with an 8 24th. And we can imagine, knowing what we know about counting, 6 24ths, 7 24ths, 8 24ths, that would work. You might say, well, that's only one fraction. But couldn't I cut these smaller again, right? We can always take half of those numbers. We can always be making those fractions smaller, okay? So some tools we have for our homework today are our fraction strips here, our fraction strips which we have here. We could draw and cut some physical models, or we can rename using our multiplication strategies. So all of those strategies will help us do those things. All right, at the bottom of our homework, we have directions to write an equivalent fraction. So the number they've got there is 4 1/3. And I just want to show you what we mean by that, especially for those of you who are at home. So 4 1/3 looks like this. Technically, we call this a mixed number because we are mixing a whole number with a fraction. So I've got my 4 wholes and then my thirds. But if I put all of these, if I cut them all into 3 slices, right, instead of having 4 1/3, now I'd have 3, 6, 9, 12, 13 thirds. So that's what it means by renaming as a fraction. 4 1/3 and 13 thirds are equivalent, and we can see that there. If you've got another strategy for doing that, you are welcome to use it. Good luck on your homework.